happy to see so many people here that I recognize, both from the city, past projects, neighborhood interactions. So great to have you. My name is Leon Lutzen. I'm the grower housing program manager for the city of Boise. For many of you, I knew and met you in my former life as a part of the current planning division as a senior planner, working specifically on projects, many of them housing focused. So in the last 3 months, I moved over to our housing and community development division to manage this program. And the point of this presentation today is to kind of walk you through what that program is trying to achieve. It looks like I have the ability to kind of unmute anybody that wants to raise their hand. For any of you who know me and know how I operate, I generally like to have questions along the way or discussion along the way. I have no problem with that. So if you do raise your hand, I can unmute you, and I can also maybe respond to things in the chat option as well if you decide to send in questions or comments that way. So yeah, in the interest of giving ourselves some time maybe for discussion at the end, I'll jump into my presentation. So thank you. Okay, so this session is growing housing in Boise, specifically focused on a discussion about the grower housing program, which technically has been around since 2018, but we've really been doing a lot with it over the last 3 to 6 months, as you'll see here shortly. I will reduce this so you can see it. All right, so I think many of you are familiar with the numbers on the left here. We've been sharing them with our community for a long time, as far back as I believe 2016 or possibly even earlier. We've been talking about the number of new residents coming to the area over the next 20 years. So in rough, that's 50,000 new residents based on a household size of on average of 2.5. That's 20,000 additional units of housing needed, which means we need to be generating 1,000 units per year. The good news is, as you'll see later, we've been keeping up with that need for 1,000. But I think the screen on your right here is going to show you why grower housing is getting a lot more involved in the conversation. Just a few headlines here. This is from Boise Market Report. Bidding wars surge as Treasure Valley buyers chase shrinking supply. Boise Dev contributed a couple articles here. Rising rents continue to worsen affordability problems in Boise area, and local home prices are rising fast as a median income is not. I think I do recognize most of the people on this call right now, or at least I did at the beginning, and I know you've been here as long as I have, if not a little longer. I personally have been here about 10 years and have seen a tremendous amount of change on this front. And as someone who actively works on projects dedicated to housing and getting that to market, it's been really interesting to have that perspective as well, and to also try to be a member of the community living here and making a life here with my family. Here are some kind of interesting statistics pulled from a Statesman article recently. Just over the last, I think 10 years is really pretty significant to identify what's happened to the median housing price in Ada County. I arrived here right around this period of time, and here's where we are today. You can see a significant increase in the median housing price. Also impacting that, that clearly demonstrates demand in a lot of ways, but it also is a function of the lack of supply. You can see here kind of the housing inventory for Ada County over kind of similar periods of time. And whereas, 10 years ago, we had, I don't even know if, I don't want to be smart enough to say this was the right amount of supply or not, but it may have kind of indicated why our prices were doing what they were doing compared to where we are today. only 470 units available in September of this year in Ada County, considering we're a city of almost 250,000 and a metro area of well over 500,000. That's a pretty staggering number to try to figure out, or to basically see what happens when supply and demand intersect. The challenges are, and this is just a rough statistic, and obviously we're taking a specific area median income level and housing type, but over that same period of time, here's essentially the trend for median sales price. And this is essentially what a family of four has been able to make in our community over that same period of time. Now, there have been some slight changes, obviously, but this gap here, widening as it is a significant concern to the city. One of the reasons Grow Our Housing was started, and I'd say one of the major reasons Lauren McLean's administration is specifically focused on trying to solve some housing issues for the community, particularly on the affordable side. Here's some numbers that we pulled together recently, just kind of helping you understand, again, these AMI levels and what they mean in a true dollar and cents fashion. So for that four person, as I mentioned before, we're looking at about $60,000 a year is what a four-person household makes at the 80% AMI. So over here is a breakdown of kind of the households in our community and where they exist. The great news is 2/3 of our community exists within this workforce and above kind of area, but we do have a substantial portion, nearly 1/3 of the community that's operating in the low to extremely low categories in terms of the income that they're generating. And what that means is, particularly as the cost of living increased dramatically around here, both in terms of the cost to purchase a home, the cost to, for transportation, essential items like food, different things like that, it's becoming a tough situation on the livability standpoint, or livability front, particularly for those families in the low to extremely low categories. So as I mentioned before, the city set a goal of 1,000 new living units per year. This is a snapshot from 2019. Again, as I mentioned, we're doing our part to, we're not doing our part, but the development industry is doing its part to meet that demand. In fact, by quite a bit more than 1,000 units per year. Interesting breakdown of where that's occurring, single family versus multifamily. We usually don't see a mix quite this high of the multifamily, but that's, I think, a sign of kind of the urbanizing nature of Boise, is that we're seeing a lot more need for infill and multifamily style development. However, despite having this excess supply, we are not seeing a reduction in housing prices. And I think what that is a reflection of is, again, a lack of, there's a lot more supply needed, and just the strength of the Boise area in terms of its attractiveness to people who want to call this place home, both long-term residents or within the close near and region, or from farther away. Again, not to throw anybody under the bus, but the in-migration from outside communities is a real thing for Boise. Utah, California, Western Washington in particular, those are all areas where we're receiving a lot of people that want to take advantage of all the great things that Boise has to offer. So on the other side, though, is, kind of to correlate this with the AMI discussion and where a lot of people in our community are existing, we have not produced a lot of income-restricted housing. We essentially have identified the need of about 350 units a year. Last year was a big year for income-restricted. The creation of Valor Point. Vista was a rehab project for one of our existing properties. But these other projects haven't even come to occupancy yet. 6th and Grove is under construction. Celebration Acres is seeking its entitlement. And I'm not certain about the Adam Gold status, but I don't believe that they're to market yet either. So, we're working on it, but is it enough? And I think my answer would be, as the manager of this program, no, not yet. We need to put a little bit more effort behind this. Particularly wanted to talk about kind of what we've got going on for unit affordability. And what you can really see here is that this 50% and below, or we kind of draw a line at 60% below, is really being underserved. A lot of the housing, something called naturally occurring affordable housing, does tend to happen at the 80 to 120% AMI. So that's just kind of occurring as a result of a typical development project. But to get to these deeper levels of affordability, we really just haven't seen that happen in our community as well as it could be. So, all that to say, grow our housing. So that is the program that I am tasked with managing. There are really 4 strategies associated with grow our housing, and I'm going to walk you through kind of each of those. But they are at a high level to establish a community land trust, to promote public and private investment into the development of housing, to expand our housing incentive program, which is something that we ran roughly from 2016 to 2018, primarily focused or exclusively focused in the downtown. And then finally, what we're doing on the maximizing our land use allowances front, which there's a lot going on with that as well. So first off, the land trust. So as a part of this presentation, I promised to explain what a land trust is. Probably a great way to explain it is to show you really our first major project associated with that, and that's Franklin and Orchard, which is located at the southwest corner of Franklin and Orchard up on the bench. It is a 200+ housing unit project. There will be 5,000 square feet of commercial, which is intended to support, local businesses or nonprofits. Per the agreement with the city, we're looking at about 80% of the units being affordable, the majority of those at the 60% AMI or below, which is important based on what I identified earlier in my presentation. But probably the biggest thing that makes this model work is that the city remains a long-term partner by retaining ownership of the land. So what this does is we essentially establish a long-term lease with the developer to allow them to make improvements. And this is 50 to 100 years. We are still working out the lease rate with the developer of this one, but we are all talking about a minimum of 50 years on this. And we offer the land at a reduced cost, so it's not free. Our goals for Grow Our Housing are to replace the dollars that we spend to make things happen. So again, that's still part of this negotiation process. But in doing that, the city has a lot of control over what gets built. For us, the target is affordable housing, with this project in particular being adjacent to Franklin Park, which is a recent addition to the bench and something so important to that community, particularly with the history of the site, former Franklin School being located here, and all of the history involved with that. We wanted something that was designed well, that interacted with the park well, and the way that we got the developer on this, which is how we will handle land trust projects moving forward, is we put out something called an RFP, or a request for proposals, wherein we specify what we want out of a project in terms of approximate number of housing units, price points, household types to be served, both from a size and an area medium income perspective. So this again is kind of our first one. It's heading to planning and zoning here hopefully in the next month or so, with the goal of being under construction by next summer, early fall. Along those lines, the city is actively pursuing additional properties right now to incorporate into the land trust, as well as evaluating its own properties to see if those might be good fits to also offer up in the land trust. It's public record now, so I'm happy to share that we're looking at 2 sites right now pretty closely. No final decisions. The first site is the former Smokey Davis site at Arthur and State Street. We find that site particularly attractive because State Street is the future of public transit in our community, and it's long been identified as a multimodal corridor. It also offers great proximity to services, parks, open space in the form of the Greenbelt, Boise River, and it's directly adjacent to Taft Elementary. So it checks a lot of the boxes that we would want out of a housing project in terms of giving people the opportunity to get to where they live, work, play, and are educated without the need for hopping in a personal vehicle for all of their trips. The second site is the Hillcrest Shopping Center. Not the entire shopping center, but a former pad site there. It's about 5 acres that has sat undeveloped for a number of years. We're just now starting that conversation, but again, along the lines of what we are looking at with the Smokey Davis site, we're making the same considerations for that property. Again, highly walkable, close proximity to public transit, close proximity to services, as well as identifying a neighborhood that, in general, housing is needed across the community, but the bench has been identified as an area that we could really stand to put some more housing. So that's another consideration that we're making on that one. And I'd love to answer questions at the end of this. And frankly, I'm not great at the Zoom conference thing, so hopefully I get to see some of your faces and answer some of your questions about this down the road. So I'll just kind of work through the information and then hopefully we have a conversation. So another strategic priority of the grower housing program is to leverage public and private funding. And we've actually experienced a lot of success with this already and continue to focus on projects that will do this for us. Pictured here are 3 that have actually finished construction and are up and running. So upper left, we have Adair Manor, which is 134 units located in the Main and Fairview area, offering a wide range of affordability, as well as some commercial spaces that are soon to come online. Lower left is the New Path Community Housing Project, which is 41 units of permanent supportive housing, also in the Main and Fairview area. And then Valor Point, which is located on State Street, 27 units, permanent supportive housing again, and specifically targeted at housing homeless veterans. There's a really touching video on New Path that I'd like to share with you guys. So I'm gonna click that real quick. Hopefully it works through Zoom. I'll check the chat feature to see if it's not, and then I'll move on. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think we're still rolling. Jumping between YouTube videos and Zoom is a little confusing sometimes. So hopefully that worked for everybody. So another aspect of grower housing that I've been particularly involved with lately is an effort to expand our housing incentive program. As I mentioned before, this was run between 2016 and 2018, specifically with the focus of bringing more housing downtown. And I would say that it did that. It certainly, it may have been somewhat market coincidental, but we had a lot of folks participate in the program. Pictured here is the Afton. Down on the bottom is the water cooler. Other projects that participated also included Fowler over in the Central Edition and the Gibson on Idaho and Fifth. So with this new version of the program, we are stepping outside of just the downtown and looking citywide for opportunities to incentivize housing. Whereas before, the incentive level had been 1,000 for a unit, a standard unit, excuse me, and 2,000 for an affordable unit. We are now only focused on affordable, and although the incentive amounts have not been nailed down yet, they will be of a substantial increase over what was originally offered. There's a lot more funding offered for this program, and the idea is to focus on achieving deeper levels of affordability regarding housing in the community. So as I pointed out in that earlier slide, the 80 to 100% is happening in a lot of ways just naturally as a result of ongoing housing development in the community. It's really that 80% and below, and specifically I'd say the 60% and below areas that need a lot of assistance. So there will be substantial, incentive in the incentives program to fund housing at that level. And that should be launched within the next 30 days. We're working closely with city leadership to get that out the door. Budget has been approved. Overall goal of doing this has been approved. We just need to get the pieces nailed down. But we plan to advertise this broadly to the development community. We're looking to target a lot more than just the affordable housing developer. Our goal is to make this program as attractive as possible that certain, more traditional market rate developers will want to work with us on this as well. And that's really our best day when we disperse affordable housing throughout the community versus concentration and different things like that. Diversity is important in so many worlds. It's no different in housing. The more diversity you have from an income perspective, a socioeconomic and background perspective, et cetera, the stronger our communities are. And I think we see an opportunity to do that with the housing program here. And then finally, there's a lot going on this level. The final stage is really the maximizing our land use allowances. As many of you are aware, the city updated its ADU code more than a year ago now, if not two. It feels like it was just yesterday, to essentially accommodate slightly larger units with an additional bedroom to make it easier to develop these without the need for additional parking. And as a planner who worked on a lot of these, both pre and post that code update, I can tell you it's been pretty well received. I don't have exact numbers, but people aren't building the 1-bedroom, 600 square foot ADU anymore. Everyone wants to go for 2 bedrooms. Everybody wants the 700 square feet. So I think we really identified some demand in the community and addressed it well with that code update. Another major effort being undertaken by some colleagues of mine, I'm loosely affiliated, is the zoning code rewrite, where basically we've been operating on a, for lack of a better term, kind of Frankenstein code patched together over the last 50 to 60 years. Roots of it kind of started back when it was cool to be a suburban style of development all the time, where everyone took their car, where you lived didn't have to be anywhere near where you worked. But we have seen a change in appetite within our community for people to be able to live and work in closer proximity to one another versus those long commutes. And as anybody who's traveled the Treasure Valley, transportation and traffic are very real concerns. And the better that we can align land use approvals and development with what the actual capacity of our transportation system is, the better. And in a nutshell, that is what the zoning code is trying to do. It's really moving us into the 21st century in terms of how we talk about how things are built, what they look like, where they're located. There's a huge outreach effort associated with this. The city has established a citizen committee, and I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong. And if anybody wants to clarify this later on, I'd really appreciate it. But I believe there's at least 20 individuals from our community that are kind of working as a advisory committee on the zoning code rewrite project. And they come from all walks of life: neighborhood leaders, nonprofit leaders, private developers. So a really broad cross-section of people engaged in this conversation, which is really what we want to see happen, because the development code and the zoning code impact everybody. It's not, what's built usually lasts for quite a while, and we all have to make it a part of our community. And then finally, the housing bonus ordinance. This is a effort that I would say is really being championed by our current mayor, Lauren McLean. It's an opportunity or an effort to make bringing to market housing a lot simpler, a lot more predictable, and it's specifically focused on awarding projects that incorporate affordable housing, projects that are located in close proximity to activity centers and major transportation corridors like State Street and other corridors like that. And also it's trying to preserve existing structures. For anybody who's paid attention over the last few years, there's certainly been a number of items before planning and zoning and city council that have prompted the city and the community to figure out, if we really love this building and we don't want it to go away, what can we do in order to encourage a developer to think about saving it? So this would actually provide some density bonuses, parking reductions, and height, alleviate some height restrictions in order to allow people to save buildings that have been here for a long time and are beloved by the community. So that really is the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions from the audience. And if anybody would like to have me unmute them, I'd be happy to do that and see if we can get a conversation going. So I see no sound on video. I am really sorry about that. And I will put the link in the chat box. Everyone can watch it on their own. That's kind of been a recurring issue with these Zoom calls, and I'm sorry that happened here, but I will I'll provide that link to everyone here in just a minute. And I guess if anybody would like to have a conversation, or if they have any questions, hopefully you know how to raise your hand in Zoom. All right, looks like Betty. All right, Betty, I just unmuted you. You might have to unmute yourself on your end too. Okay.
I've sent a couple questions through the, I guess, chat, or I don't know which question and answer session. My first question is, what is affordable in relation to income? Renters are paying $1,000 a month and up.
Yeah.
I don't think that's affordable.
Yeah, no, great question. I'm happy to answer that unless you wanted to have a follow-up first.
Okay.
So, I think I showed you that slide earlier. We have area median income as a measuring stick for what it means to have an income at certain levels. There's also HUD guidance about housing and urban development guidance that monthly rents should not exceed 30% of income. So how you get to that number is, say $1,000 a month is what the household income is for a family. To make a rent truly affordable, it should be 30% or less. Obviously, that's a pretty limited segment of our community right now that's renting anything for $300.
Oh, none.
But that is actually, I mean, those are the things that we are focused on through this program. Market rate is completely different. And obviously the market can charge whatever it wants. The grower housing program is looking to establish housing that, will be deed restricted with a set term of affordability that says you will rent this unit for this price. And that won't change as long as you are participating in the program, or as long as that covenant lasts. I don't know if that answers your question, Betty, or if there's more.
So what program is it that does?
Yeah, so that'd be housing established through grower housing, either the land trust. So there will be a deed restriction attached to the property that identifies X number of units offered at this income level and essentially, this rent level. So it will be deed restricted. But this isn't unsimilar to other programs that make use of funding from HUD or the state like IHFA program. Like, there are set limits to what the rents can be for those projects. To answer your question, what is affordable? If we look at that, 2020 income guidelines. So maybe I can share my screen again real quick, Betty, so you can see this. All right, can you see that, Betty?
Yep.
Okay.
I've got it written down.
So you do, okay. So for example, if we were to require the creation of units at 50% AMI or below, and it was a 4-person household, the 50% AMI or area median income is, according to this, $37,400. So I'll just do some quick math for you real quick, since I didn't do all this math in advance. That probably would have been smart. That's a monthly income of $3,116 divided by, or multiplied by 30 is a rent of $935. So basically, to answer your question, if you were a family of 4 or a household of 4 at the 50% area median income, and you were looking for housing that was affordable, you wouldn't want to spend more than $935. So obviously, again, if you're paying attention to the market out there, there's a lot more housing out there that's going for a lot more than that. For a family of 4, assuming a 3-bedroom household, you could easily spend $1,500 to $2,000 in this community right now. So that's why the grower housing program is so focused on specifically creating affordable housing and kind of locking that in for long-term use by the community for households that need housing at that level.
This is a really good chart.
And I'll share this with everyone after the presentation.
Good.
In fact, sharing it with everyone will give you an opportunity to click on that new path video, and you can watch it there. So again, sorry for not having any video on that one.
Where's my other questions? I have 2 questions.
And if you do have other questions, Betty, I definitely want to hear yours. If anybody else has other questions, I'd love to hear them. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you. I see something from Ann here. I really appreciate learning what's going on with development at the city level. I mainly work with those on the extreme low end of your spectrum and know what is on the horizon is hopeful. And I can tell you we could use 10 more pathways yesterday. Can you explain what an ADU means, please? I can do that real quick, Betty, while you're getting your next question. So, Ann, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. And, some other terms used are granny flat, mother-in-law quarters. It's essentially an independent dwelling unit that's on the same property as a single family home. I think I shared a picture of like the garage with the apartment above. If you've been to the north end or east end, you see a lot of those off the alleys. They're 600 to 700 square feet, 1 to 2 bedrooms. That's what we call an accessory dwelling unit, but it's attached to a primary residence. So, all right, Betty, you said you had another question?
Okay, my question is P&Z controls the location and overall developers' plans. And once it's passed, the developer goes out and builds. In our neighborhood, we have seen some new building that has been done that isn't quality building. Who takes a look at the quality of roofs, the quality of siding, the interior kind? Who watches that sort of thing? Because once a developer has something passed, it's whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, Betty, that's a good question. So there's kind of a couple things going on there. You have your initial entitlement, which says you can divide the land this way or build X number of housing units here. And at that level, there's some consideration given to design. What's the overall height? How many units are here? What does the parking look like? What do the entries to these buildings look like? And then oftentimes there's a follow-up process called design review that digs in even deeper and says, what are the actual materials going into it? What, is this stucco siding? Is this brick veneer? Different things like that. So not every project has to go through that. So I don't know if we're talking about maybe some duplexes here or maybe just single family homes that have turned over. At that level, there's not a lot of design input that goes in. It's more at the multifamily level or what we call a planned unit development level that you get to plug into that design a lot more. But the ultimate backstop that exists when it comes to building is the building code and the fire code. And basically, there's a minimum standard that has to be met in terms of the materials used that check the box for, energy efficiency, fire ratings and safety, overall accessibility and safety. But there's a pretty big spectrum of, the materials you can use in a project like that. Certainly some builders are building with cheaper materials and some are building with more expensive ones. It's kind of a project by project situation. So it's tough to answer that in like a universal way. But I don't know, Betty, I don't know if I helped you out there. If you have specific projects that you'd like me to look at sometime, I'd be happy to talk to you about them or put you in touch with whoever was involved with those approvals.
Who has to go through the design review?
Anybody that's in what's called a design review overlay. And it's usually any project that is 3 units or more. So like a triplex, different things like that. Sorry, Betty, go ahead.
Thanks.
I've got a question from Drew Alexander here. As other markets in the Treasure Valley experience similar challenges with housing costs, do you think it's overly optimistic to think that a coalition of cities may ever advocate for increased access to housing policies and tools that Idaho cities unfortunately don't have access to? A land trust is a good tool, but in Boise, we definitely have more carrots and sticks to get affordable housing built. Maybe that outreach is already happening. Appreciate your work developing this program. I would say that we are having that conversation, Drew, at the regional level. I know in particular, maybe not so much at like the market rate or 60% AMI level. I mean, my counterparts that work more regularly with either the Our Path Home program, which that's Maureen Brewer, who's working on that for us at the city. And then Rhiannon Avery, who works on specifically projects receiving home funds or any HUD funds. There is a regional coordination that occurs there, but I think, that's always been in existence, but I think honestly, we're talking to each other a lot better now than we were before. I know that Meridian, they're growing as fast as us, obviously starting with a smaller base, and they're starting to identify the needs for, how do we make housing work for our community? How do we keep it affordable? So I think those conversations are improving. And I definitely think, raising our voice together is going to be a lot better than one jurisdiction standing up and yelling alone all the time. But yeah, I think as this region grows and becomes more dense and more urbanized, and ultimately more complex, the need for that coordination is going to increase. So, all right, we have 3 minutes left. Anybody have a final question or anything else? Deborah, let me unmute you, and you might have to unmute yourself as well. Oh, maybe I unmuted Anne, sorry. Let's see. All right, Deborah, are you there?
Yes, I have a question. What about tiny houses? Is there something that will be in the discussion eventually?
Tiny home, yeah. And so when, there's kind of, tiny home is a loaded term sometimes, particularly for city officials. I know that there's like tiny home movement and tiny home living and all those things that are popular on HGTV, where you see people building homes on the backs of flatbed trailers and, living their best life up and down the coast. That is one version of tiny home living. There are other builders who are actually building small footprint housing that's on a permanent foundation that I think could also at times be considered tiny home. We often call it cottage or pocket neighborhood development. In fact, a gentleman on here with us, Bud Confer with NeighborWorks Boise, they've been in that niche a lot. So what Bud is doing when it's a permanent foundation and there's infrastructure and things like that, that's an easy thing to get to a yes on, because that's just meeting the minimum building code and getting approval from the city for an entitlement. If it's a movable structure, again, along the lines of tiny home living on the back of a trailer, our city code does not accommodate for that real well yet, largely because it's difficult to charge impact fees associated with those types of housing units. An impact fee is essentially a user fee to establish a dwelling within a community and make use of the services that are available: sewer, trash, fire, parks. When you have a movable structure like that, it's difficult to assess a development fee or an impact fee that way. And I think that's been some of the biggest holdup in making those things a possibility around here, is just the transient nature of them. But I don't think that it's impossible for us to figure that out, but there hasn't been any movement on it yet lately.
But I have a question. You said there is also the structure that are not movable, but they are very small. And so how can we find places for that? I mean, I can imagine the neighborhoods might say, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, well, I think our new housing bonus ordinance actually is going to facilitate that happening a little bit easier in certain areas of the city. It really comes down to, can you meet fire code, building code? Can you provide parking necessary? Can you, ensure that livability is being maintained and that you're not adversely impacting the community? But, if you have the zoning in place, or if you're making use of that housing bonus ordinance, you could propose a project like that to the city, and you would just have to work your way through city approval and agency approval to get it done. But I think our new housing bonus ordinance actually could accommodate that type of development a lot easier than our current code does. Okay, everyone, we are 1 minute past, so I want to thank you all. I'm going to send Melinda my presentation, and I'll make sure that she gets it to all of you. And again, please watch that New Path video if you didn't, or if it didn't work for you in terms of sound. It's really worth it. And I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this today, and we'll talk to you later.